It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Welcome, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. It's early September 2019. We're going to have a little bit of a different show. Every once in a while, I have this come up where the show gets to be more focused on one topic or the other instead of the normal mix. So for those of you who love the investing skeptically stuff, you are going to freaking love this episode. A couple things we've got coming up. We have asset allocation part 3, some of my thoughts on asset allocation in specific reference to the U.S. stock market. We have an episode of Church Money, which we haven't had for a while. Someone sent me a super secret inside document from a church they're involved with, and we're going to go over and we're going to try to find out where the money goes and how much goes to the greater community and helping maybe feed the homeless or provide housing for the poor, things like that. And you won't be surprised, I guess, to find out if you listen to the show that it's virtually nothing. Another thing that has come up recently, many people have asked about, is a thing called the mega backdoor Roth IRA. I haven't covered it in the past because it will probably not apply to 99% of you. But if you're one of those lucky 1%ers, not necessarily the highest income to be a 1%er, but you happen to work at the right kind of company that allows you to do this. That's what I mean with the 1%, the mega backdoor Roth IRA. And another thing I stumbled across, people have been asking for, I didn't realize that Motley has a couple of actual genuine mutual funds. And so we're going to look at what seems to be the genius of the Motley and how they compare to index funds. So we're going to look at that and, maybe some other things. A fun thing that I did yesterday, myself, wife, and 2 kids went to Warren Dunes State Park in Michigan and got to walk over sand for several hours and hiking in the forests and played a little bit on the beaches on the eastern side of Lake Michigan. Had absolutely great fun. It was perfect weather. And then in the evening, we got some wood from the campground store and had a nice fire. Cooked ourselves some little pies. You take like a cherry pie. We had cherry pie and apple pie filling and some bread, and you put it in this metal thing you stick in the fire, and not too long because you'll burn the shit out of it. And you bring that out, and you made yourself a little, kind of like a little pie, or you can make a ham and cheese or a grilled cheese, kind of that way. We did that, and of course, cooked some hot dogs. We forgot the mushrooms. We forgot the marshmallows, so we didn't get to make any s'mores or just roast marshmallows. Next time, we'll have to make sure we take the marshmallows. So we had a fantastic time, and of course, I was able to take the electric car, my Chevy Bolt. It was a 90-mile drive, so I actually could drive there and back in the really nice weather quite easily. But while we were there on our campsite, I plugged the car in. I really did have the expectation that I would be able to use a 50-amp outlet in the campground. It did promote that, but apparently you had to pay a couple of dollars extra to get a site with 50-amp service. And I didn't have the exact connector plug adapter to use the 30-amp service. So I ended up charging at about 12 amps, which only added, we charged for like 7 hours, and maybe it added 25 or 30 miles. So I didn't need the 25 or 30 miles, and they were free, so I just enjoyed it and got it. But I ordered myself an RV configured 30-amp plug, so next time I can get at least more electricity. And of course, if I actually needed more power, I could have got the 50 amp site and added close to 25 miles per hour to the car. So, if we're there for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 hours, or if you're there overnight, you could add a whole bunch more and then, continue your journey. But it's not that far for us, so we didn't actually need the mileage. But it was great fun. Everything went well. We had a wonderful time. And one of the nice things about Warren Dunes for me is it is about family. Not only my wife and kids, but I think a lot about my parents when I'm there. It's something that from the age of about 10, my parents went there, and I've been to that part of Michigan during late summer, early fall, almost every year since I was 10. And so I'm now 52. So I think I've missed 2, maybe most 4 seasons. So it's a long-standing tradition to go there and just have a little fun, do something different, and not think about the world so much and thinking about Trump or things like that. So anyway, we've got all those fun things coming up. And of course, after all those segments, I'll cover my upcoming travel plans and the conferences that are coming up that maybe you would want to go to. So hang on to that. We'll do a quick little interlude here, and we'll go into a handful of Investing Skeptically segments. This Investing Skeptically segment is Asset Allocation Part 3, U.S. Stock Market. Part 1 was the general overview of all categories. Part 2 was some information about bonds, and this Part 3 will be about the U.S. stock market. Hopefully in a few weeks I can get to Part 4, which will be REITs and international, some thoughts about that. Quick follow-up on Part 2 with bonds. Some people did point out that there are other bond funds at Vanguard that are within the categories that I talked about, and those would be perfectly fine. 2, the big trick with bonds is, especially nowadays, the interest rates, the yields are low, so you want to make sure your expenses are incredibly low, and that's what index funds do. We're going to look at the U.S. stock market now, and again, with index funds, the expense ratios are phenomenally lower, and so if you're in a stock mutual fund that has a 1.5 or 2 or 3, like some of the super shitty funds we talk about, you have to beat that. You have to do that much better to cover the expenses, and that's really hard to do. So index funds have an advantage there. There's also other expenses involved with trading that aren't necessarily in the published expense ratio. The published expense ratio is defined by a law of what must go in it and what does not necessarily need to go in it. I don't know all the details of that law, but if a fund has expenses that aren't qualified as something that's required to be included in the published expense ratio, they're not going to include it because no one else is, and it would make them look more expensive. One of the things that I know is not in there is the actual costs to do trading. So a managed fund that trades a lot will have other expenses involved in trading that aren't shown in the expense ratio. So you have all of that. You also have the possibility with a managed fund that because they're trading more frequently, that more of your gains are part of your earned income, short-term gain, higher tax rates, and not the lower long-term capital gains tax rates, which could be as low as 0% if you don't make a whole lot of money. For most people, hopefully, you're paying 15%, and if your income is really high, maybe 23% or even 23.8% with a different little tax burden that goes on top of the 20%, which I won't bore you with. More about index funds are in other episodes, and I'm sure I will cover that again in the future. So with the U.S. stock market, I break it down into 6 segments, not sectors. Sectors would be like biotech or banking or manufacturing, whatever you want to create as a certain type of industry or industry area. Those are often called market sectors. I call these segments, and I use 6 of them, and I'm going to go over what those funds are. Again, each one of these has currently at Vanguard a $3,000 minimum. So to use all 6 funds would require 6 times 3, $18,000, but it would be out of whack according to my allocation. So you'd probably need something more like 50 or 60 minimum. And of course, if you have some bonds at international, it might take 100,000 or more to be able to fully implement this. If you don't have that kind of money, one thing that you can do is you can get the U.S. Total Stock Market Index Fund at Vanguard for $3,000. That's the Admiral shares, phenomenally low expense ratio of 0.04% per year. If you don't have $4,000, Vanguard Vanguard has, how's that? Vanguard has target date funds that one can use, and I think those have a minimum of $1,000. If you don't even have that, you can go to Fidelity. Their total stock market index has 0 cost to get in, and those are all great choices of what you can do. Using these 6 segments helps, I think, increases overall returns and perhaps reduces overall volatility in the long run. But when you're talking of amounts of a couple of thousands of dollars, it's probably not worth the effort for the time that you'd have to spend to do it. So again, this is a little bit larger portfolio. And of course, if you have 500,000 or a couple million, it's really easy to do. These are the 6 funds. They're large cap growth and value, mid cap growth and value, small cap growth and value. You can look them all up in Vanguard, or I will give you the symbols here. Large cap growth is VIGAX. Large cap value is VVIAX. In the mid cap section, we have VMGMX and VMVAX. And small cap growth, VSGAX. And small cap value, VSIAX. If you're taking precious notes and following along and you didn't get all that, like I said, you can just Google it and you can find it, figure it out. And if that doesn't work, you can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. Now, a couple things that I do with this. One is I am convinced that there's value in the idea of regression to the mean. And I think all 6 of these segments, based on the historical data that I've seen, what is available, is they all make, give or take, about 10% per year in the long run. And the long run is not last year. It's not the last 3 to 5 years, and not even 10 years really cuts it for me. And we're talking 15, 20 years. In the long run, they all make about 10%. One can argue that over really long periods of time, small caps do tend to make a little bit more, maybe a whole % more. Again, it depends on the starting and ending date and how you slice it. And so for the purpose of this, we're going to kind of just ignore that a little bit. But all 6 of these segments make about 10%. And if you bought them in the exact right ratio, you would essentially recreate the total stock market index fund. And of course, you would ask, well, why don't I just make my life easy and buy the total stock market index fund? And as I said earlier, if you only have a few thousand or maybe 10 or 20,000, that's probably what you should do anyway. Just keep it easy. Keep it easy. Keep it simple. Make sure you're saving more money. If you only have a few $1,000s, the next thing you need to do is not figure out the most ultimate perfect way of investing. You need more money. That's your big problem. And that's what you've got to work on, either having less debt, less expenses, or making more money, even if that means a second or third job, which would suck. I've been there, done that. I don't want to do that again. So one of the nice things about this is that in the short run, again, for me, the short run is a couple of years, you can get significant variations. And I'm going to point out one. And all this data I'm looking at here is from Vanguard's website, and it's from the time ending June 30th of 2019. I update these templates that I use once every calendar quarter because fluctuations within days or within weeks or within a couple of months can distract you from what you're supposed to be paying attention to in the long run. So don't get too bogged down with the daily detail. But as a reference, the 12-year performance, again, ending June 30th, for the small cap value fund at Vanguard is minus 1.56%. So for the 12 months ending June 30th, it lost money. Didn't lose a lot, but it lost 1.56%, whereas the mid-cap growth made 12.05%. And that's the kind of stuff that I find to be interesting and or exciting. And what do you do with that information? That's the next thing, is that if nothing else, you can rebalance your portfolio if it becomes out of tolerance. And the question is, what is your tolerance? You can set that by dollar amounts. You can set it by percentages. And I'm going to give you a breakdown of the percentages that I'm currently using as a guideline in my head. But I don't always follow that because every client is different. And this may not be right for anybody listening, but it's to give you some ideas of how you can look at it. So large cap growth, I'm currently putting about 28% of the U.S. money in large cap growth, about 30% in large cap value, about 10% in mid cap growth, 11% in mid cap value, 10% in small cap growth, and 11% in small cap value. And you'll see each one of those large, medium, and small sizes, I'm putting more money in value than growth. And that's because value has not done as well. And it's one of those things that people are often shocked by, the fact that I'm following kind of a contrarian philosophy, and I'm putting more money in the segments that haven't done as well, knowing that they all provide basically the same returns in the long run. In the short run, we can put a little bit more money where it has not done as well. The funny thing, of course, is if you then build a portfolio like this and look at the historical performance, it looks like you're underperforming the market over the last 1, 3, 5, maybe even 10 years, because you're putting more money in what has not done as well. So I'm definitely not chasing the hot money. I'm skimming from the hot money and putting it where it's not as hot. Like I said, it's contrarian philosophy, it's counterintuitive philosophy, and it creates, I hope, a long-term pattern of buying low and selling high. If you were someone in retirement, and I previously mentioned that mid-cap growth made 12%, that would be a really nice place to pull money from right now. So in a full-blown portfolio, and you have the cushion and everything set, you get some of your money from bond yields, you get some of it from stock dividends. If you're spending more than what those yields and dividends come up to, you would have to sell something. Now, it doesn't mean that the overall value of your portfolio is going down, because in this case, over the last 12 months, maybe a portfolio might have gone 6, 7, 8% up. And this one particular one went up 12%. So you're still making more money in the last 12 months compared to the amount you're taking out. So as long as you're taking out something like 5% or less, unless you're older, you can take out more because you won't be taking out as many years, at least theoretically. That's what the actuarial tables say. As long as your portfolio is growing about or greater than the amount you're taking out, it should work out. That's the theory anyway. But you take from your winners. So there's 12%. Also, the real estate one was up over 12%. So you could take money out there. But I definitely would not sell from the small cap value, the one that lost 1.5%. There I might add to. So if you're in retirement, you're taking money out, you take from the winners. If you're getting closer and closer to retirement and you're adding money still, you add to the ones that are lagging or that lost. So it creates, like I said, this long-term process of adding where things have not done as well and skimming off where things have done better. How far off of the percentages should they be? I know, a couple percentage points. If I said that large cap growth is 28% and you have 30, I'm not that worried. But if large cap growth target is 28% and you have 45% of all of your U.S. stocks in that fund, you might want to trim it down somehow. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you're all in a taxable account, there might be tax consequences. So you have to pay attention to what those might be and decide if you want to pay those tax bills or if you want to just keep rolling forward with what you have. You can also rebalance by adding money. And of course, if you're in retirement, you can rebalance by removing money. So all those things are things that you need to think about. The U.S. stock market as a whole right now, the large cap growth and value is probably around 75% of the market. And if you added up the two numbers I gave you, 28% for large cap growth and 30% for large cap value, of course, that's 58%. And so the allocation not only can adjust from growth versus value back and forth, but between large cap and mid cap and small cap. And so mid cap and small cap over 5 years and even up to 10 years has underperformed. I want more money there. Large caps, particularly large cap growth, has done wonderfully every single year. For almost all of the last 10 years, it is definitely the best segment of the 6. So I start shrinking its target allocation because, again, it won. It won again. It won again. And the more often it wins, the more years in a row that it wins, and the bigger the wins are, the more money I want to gradually, slowly remove from there. I'm not putting it all in one of the 6 segments and then moving it next month to another one of the 6 segments. There's nothing like that. But instead of maybe 35% in large cap growth and 35% in large cap value, those numbers have slowly come down over the last several years as they have continued to win. The idea is that when things that haven't done as well, like small cap and mid cap value, recover and catch up and regress to the mean, you'll have more there than you would have had before. So those are some of my thoughts on what to do with the asset allocation. It's asset allocation part 3, the U.S. stock market. Again, if you didn't get some of those symbols, you can look them up on Vanguard or send me an email, Phil@Polaris Financial Planning. The 4th and final segment of this series will talk about real estate and international. And those are some of my thoughts on asset allocation.
And he's right. It is a miracle. Except when you think about it, it's actually not. It's science, which I'd argue is actually better and more convenient than a miracle, because you don't have to spend the next 2,000 years worshipping the scientists. You can just be like, thanks. And while...
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
This Investing Skeptically segment is on the mega backdoor Roth. I know, it's such a funny name, the mega backdoor Roth, I guess Roth IRA. Previously, and apparently it's been a while because I just had to pull this up, I have talked about the backdoor Roth, where you can make extra contributions to an IRA, and under this certain perfect circumstances, you can convert it via a thing called a backdoor and make it into a Roth contribution, even though you don't qualify for a Roth contribution based on the other rules. And if you want to know more about that, it is discussed in episode 157 and 212. And again, both of those are a couple years old. And it's one of those things that maybe I'll do an update on that specific topic in the future if people are interested. But it always seems like there's more new stuff. But with this mega backdoor Roth, it's been around for a while, and occasionally I get questions on it. And most of the time, people ask me to talk about it. I say no, because it will apply to such a very small, very, very small percentage of the listeners. But some changes have happened, and some companies have made progress on this front, and I've gotten more emails asking me to talk about it. So here I am. I'm going to talk about it. The mega backdoor Roth IRA. First of all, most of you will not qualify for one of several reasons, so it will not apply to you. A couple of things that you need is, one, you have to have income sufficient to save a ton of money to qualify for the backdoor Roth IRA. And of course, you must meet all of the other technical qualifications and things are required by your employer to be in place. So let me get to some of the specifics. I'll start with the employer stuff. First of all, you have to work for somebody or someone that has a 401k. If your employer doesn't have a 401k, this rest of this is irrelevant to you. If they have a 403b, I am not aware that that works. So probably not. If someone finds that that does work, let me know. There's a lot of technical papers written about this and releases from the IRS over the years, and maybe I've missed something because this shit gets complicated. So first of all, you have to have a 401k at work. The olden days, traditional 401k, you put the money in, and that money, that doesn't count as your income. You don't pay any taxes on it. So you get to save more money. It grows and grows and grows all the time. Tax deferred. You pay no taxes on any of the growth, any of the dividends. Whatever money you make, it just keeps growing, growing, growing. When you switch jobs, you can roll it over to an IRA. You could also roll it over into your new employer's 401k. I don't recommend that. That's a whole other topic. But over the years, everything's fine. And finally, at some point, they created Roth IRAs. And then, of course, they slowly, eventually created Roth 401ks, where if your situation is advantageous to you, you could put money into the Roth 401k. The good thing about that is that no matter how big it grows, there's no taxes ever under current rules. I always like to stress that. But you don't get any tax advantage in the year that you put the money in. So if you think at some point you might pay higher taxes in the future, either because you're saving a ton of money and you're going to be better off in retirement, or you know you're going to get assets from some relatives or parents when they pass away, you'll have more money in the future. Or if you think, which I do, that there's a likelihood that we're going to have higher tax rates in general in the future, doing the Roth might be beneficial if you can financially swing it. So if you put $10,000 into your Roth 401k, that $10,000 doesn't come off your taxes. You pay taxes on that. If that $10,000 grows to $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, theoretically, again, under current rules, you pay no taxes when you take the money out. I keep stressing the under current rules thing because I would not be surprised at 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Some politicians say there is a ton of money in Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks. We should at least collect some tax on that money. So keep that in mind. But currently, that's the game. There's a third category for your 401k. We have the traditional, I'll call it the traditional deductible contributions. You have the Roth non-deductible contributions. And you have a third category, which is almost never discussed because now we're getting pretty technical, is what's called after-tax contributions. So it's technically neither a traditional 401k contribution, and it's neither, I guess, is that proper grammar? I don't know. It's also not a Roth 401k contribution. So it gets tricky. And one of the problems with this is that if your employer does not allow after-tax contributions, the rest of this is moot. I mean, you might have a 401k, it's traditional 401k only. Then you can't use this strategy. If it's a traditional 401k and or a Roth 401k, still you cannot use this special little thing. Your employer's plan has to specifically detail in the plan documents, and hopefully you can go to your HR department and ask them about this. However, over the years, I have found that employees in the HR department often don't know the details of the 401k plan. Somebody in the office or the corporation should, but the person you go talk to may not. There's always exceptions. If they don't know what you're talking about, you might be able to call the custodian for your 401k plan, which could be something like Schwab, Fidelity, John Hancock, Vanguard, whatever, those companies, and ask them about this. And the things you want to ask about is, first of all, does your plan allow after-tax contributions? And you have to make sure that they understand that you're not talking about traditional 401k and you're not talking about Roth 401k. You're talking about a third category of money, non-deductible contributions, after-tax contributions. The next thing that you need to have is your employer's plan must allow you to take in-service contributions. And what that means is while you still work there, you can take some of your money out and move it somewhere else. Probably 95% or higher of companies do not allow that at all. Probably 95 to 99% don't allow after-tax contributions. So we're talking about a very small percentage of employers that do this. If they do allow an after-tax contribution, and if they do allow in-service withdrawals, you will have to move your money by yourself every time you make an after-tax contribution. Now, when I say have to, okay, maybe you don't have to. You could just leave it there for years and years and years. However, at some point, you will have to produce meticulous records of what money you put in that was deductible and what that was not deductible or after tax and what part was Roth 401k. If you cannot correctly detail what was put in as an after-tax contribution, when you roll it over, if you just roll it over to a regular IRA or you lose this information, you could end up paying tax on that money twice. So that's up to you. If you want to subject yourself to a lifetime of record keeping on this information, you don't have to do an in-service withdrawal, but I'm betting you're going to regret it at some point in life when you don't have the records and you have to pay tax on this money twice. So you need to have a company that has traditional and or Roth and after-tax contributions. It has to allow in-service withdrawals, and you yourself have to regularly, meticulously check and make sure that you are doing these in-service withdrawals. If you get paid every week, you're going to have to do that every week. If you get paid 2 weeks or once a month, you're going to have to do that every time you get paid and every time money goes into the after-tax segment of your 401k. I have recently talked to somebody whose employer has made this all possible and automagical. I'd never heard of this before. There's only one company that I know of. It's a big tech company out on the West Coast in the Northwest. And they have set this up that you just check a few boxes on a form and you tell them where your money is going to a Roth IRA. And not only do they allow after-tax contributions, but they'll automatically move it to your Roth 401k for you within a day or two. And that situation, it's starting to look pretty sexy. This might work for you. You, of course, have to run all of this by your tax professional. Make sure that they are in agreement that this is a good idea for you. You might want to run it by me. I won't be able to give you exact tax information and advice like your tax professional, but maybe we can talk about it and find something that is a problem or confirm that it's going to work. Of course, all of this is moot if you don't have the money to put this in. And just a reminder, in calendar year 2019, and this is going to change for 2020, the maximum amount that can go into your 401k from any source, you or your employer, is $56,000 with a $6,000 catch-up contribution if you are age 50 or above. I always say over 50, and I always wondered if it was, does 50 count or does it really have to be over 50? It's the calendar year in which you turn 50 years of age. You are considered over 50 that year for tax purposes, and you can enjoy the catch-up contribution limit. So you would have to have more than $19,000 or more than $25,000, and the amount your employer puts in reduces the amount that you can put in as after-tax contributions. If you don't make enough money, you're not going to qualify. If you make enough money, but not too much money, you could just use a regular old Roth and ignore all this complicated shit. And if you're married, you could do a Roth for yourself and for your spouse. Or if your spouse has a job, they could max out their 401k before you start fucking around with this detail work. So there's all kinds of options, but I've now gotten more and more requests about it. So I wanted to go over it a little bit. If you have more specific questions and maybe something that affects you personally, you can always send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. Maybe we schedule a time to talk about it. Do not send any detailed, complicated numbers, social security numbers, anything in that first contact email. I want to make sure that we actually connect and make sure we have the right place and the right people, so you don't accidentally type in your email wrong and send your social security number somewhere else into the ether. So that's the wrap up on the mega backdoor Roth IRA. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship. This is a special episode of Church Money. At least I think that's what I decided to call it. This was sent to me by someone who's actually actively involved in the church, or this specific church, and therefore I can't tell you the name or the city. I'm not even going to tell you the state, but I will tell you that it is a Lutheran type of church, and there's a whole bunch of different brands of Lutheran, so hopefully that's vague enough, but you get the idea. This is not a fringe organization. This is part of the mainstream religion, not a cult. Well, that's debatable. But anyway, so we have some financial information, and so something that you can do to help out me and the fellow listeners have some fun is assist me in this project of Church Money. If you happen to be in a church, wedding, funeral, just something you can't get out of, or unfortunately, if you have to go cast a ballot, you have to vote, and it happens to be in a church, look around in the main hallway near the main entrance. Sometimes on the table, the church will actually put out their financial report or a statement or something about where the money's going. And of course, if you're involved with a church and can get more details, you can send that to me and we can have that discussion, just like I did with this person, about how much information I can reveal. If you're not a member and you're forced to vote there and you want to give me the name and the address and the specific details of the church, I'll do it. It's not a problem. But this person, I'm also protecting their identity. So we're going to get all this information without revealing who sent it to me. So this is a church that has a budget of about $425, $450. So it's not a giant church, and $300,000 of that comes from general envelope contributions. And I don't know how many people are in this church, but it would be fascinating, and maybe I can still find out. But again, I worry about getting too many details since this person didn't want their name to be used. A fascinating, fun thing you can do is see how many people gave all this money, and then you can calculate on average what is the amount per person that's been given. And if it's, $100 or $1,000 per person, you can also take a look at what the average income for a family is in that area, and you can do some quick numbers to try to figure out how much each member probably makes on average and how much they're giving. And when I've done that in the past, often the tithing is nowhere near 10%. It's often like 3 or 4 because some people feel like they're struggling, and a lot of people are. And so it's hard to give 10% of your money to something that is not directly providing a benefit. I mean, it might be a nice social club and you might be a believer and think you're getting spiritual fulfillment, but it's still hard to part with money. They also have direct deposits, which is about 90,000, close to 100. They have money came in for the building fund, money direct deposit for the building fund. And then there's the plate offerings, and that's when they pass the plate around. Oh, and by the way, this is for an entire freaking year. So 400,000 for an entire freaking year. I'm guessing it's a relatively small church, maybe 80 to 100 people show up. Because, I mean, that would be about 4,000 per family. No, it's got to be twice that size. Well, maybe 100 people show up, but there's 200 or 300 members, something like that. Let's see. Non-member checks. I collected almost $3,000. And then there's other $7,000. And from trust, charities, endowments, etc., another $10,000. So it won't add up to exactly anything because I'm kind of rounding here to, again, be coy with the numbers so no one can figure out exactly. If I went down to the dollar and penny, someone might listen to this and figure out it's their church also. Expenses. First thing we have is education program, 70,000. I wonder what that is. It must be, is that Sunday school? Maybe they have a school. I don't know. Mission, 36,000. Worship program, 10. And then evangelism, stewardship, and the youth program all add up to another 5,000 or 6,000. Here's fun stuff. Pastor support, 130 grand. I don't know what pastor support means. I'm assuming it's wages and maybe some money for retirement, maybe includes payment on his house and mortgage and all that stuff. I don't know what's included in that, but if there's just one pastor, because I don't even know, there might be 2. If it's one pastor, it's 130 grand. Other staff and administrative expenses is around 80. Plant operation, that would be generally running the building, and plant maintenance works up to another 30 plus thousand. And this one was a surprise to me. Debt service. So they're coughing up 60 plus K a year to pay on their debt. So this is an organization that has a good chunk of debt. I don't know what the time frame on the loan is, but paying $60,000 out of a $400,000 budget is a big chunk. What is that? 1/6, 1/7 of all of their money goes to debt. There's a couple other miscellaneous little things, and they also have various checking and savings accounts around 70, 80 grand. So a good chunk of money sitting around to cover the cash flow, which is good from a business running standpoint. The one thing you will notice, and one of the reasons the person sent it to me, what part of this actually goes out to feeding the poor or the hungry, and close to zero? I mean, mission, and I did research on the mission, and again, I'm not going to go into the details of the mission because that's how I figured out exactly what type of church this was, because the mission was specific to them. But that's just more proselytization and maybe building a church in some poor country and fucking up their society. So that's not helping anybody. So basically nothing, absolutely nothing goes from this church, right, bringing in $400,000. Because people sometimes think half the money you give to the church goes to helping poor people. Okay, maybe if not half, 25%. Okay, if not 25%, maybe 10. Okay, if not 10, something, right? No. It's staff, it's the pastor, it's the building, it's building repairs and maintenance, and it's promoting of the religion, keeping you indoctrinated in indoctrinating future children, and then going over to some other place in the world and indoctrinating people there because you know better what they need than they do. Yes, deep sarcasm. So this is a church, again, $400,000+ budget, and virtually nothing goes to actually doing any good for anybody anywhere. So that's this time, this episode of Church Money. If you can get a statement or a document, spreadsheet, pamphlet from a nearby church, or one that you're compelled to go into to vote, or for religion, or for a wedding or a funeral, look around. See if you can see some numbers or a financial report or a pamphlet. Grab one, scan it in, send it to me, and maybe your nearby church can be next on the show for Church Money.
My father, the man responsible for my education, taught me that Islam, rightly understood, is a religion and philosophy of peace. In fact, he said that for any society to be peaceful and prosperous, it had to institute the rule of God, or Sharia. I came to disagree with my father. It was a gradual process that started when I entered and lived in societies such as the Netherlands and the United States that applied man-made constitutions and laws. Both countries are peaceful and prosperous. I now disagree even more with my father that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the amount of security that is deployed tonight here, the amount of security that is deployed for the Richmond Marathon. 6 months ago, the Boston Marathon was bombed by two brothers who invoked the founding documents and the founding father of Islam. I disagree with my father when I look at the wanton killing of the Westgate Mall in Nairobi by Somali men invoking Allah and Muhammad to justify their horrid act. Kenya is the most hospitable country to Somalis fleeing their own country, so it distresses me even more. I disagree with my father when I look at the reports this week of 30 men and women worshipping in Iraq who are killed by a suicide bomber invoking the very same God and the very same prophet that they invoke. I disagree with my father when he says that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the 120,000 dead in Syria, Syria is now a stage of a proxy war between Islam's two most important and most influential nations, the Sunni Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Shia Islamic Republic of Iran. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read about the almost daily reports of the destruction of churches, the pillaging of Christian property, the rape of Christian women, the terrible exodus of Christians and other religious minorities from Muslim countries. All this is done by men who invoke the founding father and founding documents of Islam. I disagree with my dear beloved father when I read about the teenage girl in Pakistan who's shot point blank in the head by a man invoking Allah and Muhammad because she wanted education. In the name of Allah and Muhammad, women are forbidden to drive. They're forbidden to own their own reproductive rights. They're forbidden to do anything unless they have permission from a male guardian. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read these founding documents and I study the history and the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In there, I find an insistence of war and intolerance towards infidels, the hypocrites, those who associate God with others, homosexuals, women, and so on.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
I have a special Investing Skeptically segment here on the Motley Fool organization. You may have heard about it. I checked my records, and it looked like show number 177. I did a a little thing on the Motley Fool. So if you want to go check that out as well, that's all the way back from the summer of 16. I can't even believe I've been doing this podcast. Let's see, when did I start this thing? 2015. Shit, 4.5, almost 5 years. And of course, I had a different podcast before then, and I was on another podcast before then. So I've been doing this for a while. And recently, I've got several people asking me about Motley Fool and how they do. And I would refer them to that old episode. And one of my laments was that there was not a Motley Fool mutual fund. Well, turns out I was wrong. There's 2 Motley Fool mutual funds, and so we can play with those, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. I went and pulled up the data on Morningstar, and this data is as of September 5th, 2019, so depending on when I get this into a show, it might be a few days to a few weeks old, but it'll give you the idea. There's 2 funds. One is a mega large cap, super growthy kind of fund, mostly U.S., but with a little bit of international flavor. And then the other one is a U.S. mid-cap growth fund. Why these are the only 2 funds they have, I do not know. I don't know if they had 10 other funds and they've closed them. I don't know the history behind them. I don't know if they've changed over time. So these comparisons might not be particularly relevant to their history, but it's all that I have without going and talking to Motley Fool themselves and getting them to divulge data for me, which I can't see why in the fuck they'd do that. So we're just going to go with what we have. I'm going to do a large cap first. This is their symbol is FOOLX, Fool X. And I'm going to compare it to the Vanguard Large Cap Growth Fund because the vast majority of this mutual fund from Motley Fool is large cap growth stocks. Now, maybe I should give them a little more credit for the international picks that they have, but the bulk of the money, 65 to 70% today, is in U.S. large cap growth. Not in mid cap, not in small cap, not in value. So it's pretty easy to make a fair comparison, and often, sometimes funds you'll see this more common today than in the past years. They'll compare themselves to the total market or the S&P 500. But if they're specifically focused on large cap growth, they look better because large cap value has slightly underperformed large cap growth. So it's a fun way to play games with numbers. So 1 year performance, the Vanguard large cap growth is 5.17. The Motley Fool fund is 5.23. All right, not so bad. The performance per year for the last 3 years, Vanguard again is 5.43, and the Motley Fool fund is 15.43, and the Motley Fool fund is 15.03. So very close again. The 5-year performance, Vanguard 11.88, Motley Fool 8.85. So a good 3 points behind, and 10-year is a similar kind of result. Vanguard 14.85 versus the Fool fund of 11.87. So there again, 3% behind per year. So that's what the results have been. And, I don't have a way to measure their other managed portfolios or the ways that they put money into things because it's kind of in a black box. It's hidden. So this is what I have, and this says that they've done about as well as the large cap growth index in the last 1 and 3 years, but underperformed by 3% a year over a 5 and 10 year time period. So there were some years in there where they did quite poorly. Also, this fund has an expense ratio over 1%. I've seen 1.1 and 1.2, depending on where I look. Currently in Morningstar, that number is 1.06%, whereas the index is 0.07. Let me see if I can grab that here real quick. The Vanguard Growth Index Admiral Shares is 0.05%. So almost exactly 1% more, and the results are either about the same for the last couple of years or underperforming by 3%, give or take, per year in the long run. So good, bad. You may like it, you may not like it, but that's the facts. The turnover is relatively low. It's slightly higher than the index, but not bad. So that's not going to be a big deal killer. And I'm just looking at some of the other stats here, and you know, it looks like a pretty good fund, but again, not better than the index. And I don't know that it will or will not be better than the index going forward. The other fund, of course, is their mid-cap fund, and that is called TMFGX. TMFGX. This one has not been around as long, but it's even a better, more clean comparison because it is all U.S. stock, it is all mid-cap, and it's all growth. Very easy to compare to the Vanguard Mid-Cap Growth Index Fund, and that is VMGMX. So the 1-year performance, again, as of the date I pulled this data, the Motley Fool Fund is minus 6.73, and the Vanguard Fund is positive 4.73. So a spread of 10, 11 points, almost 12 points. That's pretty bad. 3-year average is 11.68 versus 12.47 for Vanguard, and the 5-year average return is around 8 versus 9.4. So in the long run, it's underperformed by a point and a half per year, but in the last 12 months, it's done awful. And I don't know what's going on there or why, but I bet if you look at this, and this happens with a lot of funds, companies can launch multiple funds, and only the ones that do really good in the first year or two survive. And so for many years, they'll have a track record that looks pretty good if you include that first year or two. And of course, the funds that they launch that do awful in the first year or two, they get rid of. But this was a quick and easy way for me to compare two Motley Fool mutual funds and how they've done to their relative indexes. We're going to wrap up the show here, and I've got some events and activities to cover coming up. Again, my apologies for the show having taken almost 2 weeks to get to this show. I hope to put together a show that will air sometime late in September, but I'm not positive that that's going to happen. I'm working towards it, but in just 4 or 5 days here, I'm going to get on a plane and go to Italy. I'm going to the region of Calabria, and Calabria is the toe of the boot. It's a part of the Italy that I've never been to, and it's a 2-week trip. And again, it's a little bit of a different trip for us because the entire 2 weeks is programmed out. So we're going to go when they tell us, where they tell us, and everything was included in one flat, really, really reasonable price. And I think we're going to have a heck of a good time. But I did check the weather, and it looks like it's going to be really super humid every single day. So that's nice because the temperature doesn't change much between midday and midnight, but it's going to be humid every day. But we are going to have amazing food. And of course, I'll give you a little summary, a wrap up when we get back from that. But that's going to be pretty much my second half of September. And of course, as soon as I get back, I have to do my billing for Polaris Financial Planning, which I do once a quarter at each calendar quarter. So it's going to be a very busy time as soon as I get back to get that all finalized and out the door. And a few days after that, I'm going to the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference. It's formally October 4th through 6th. I understand they still have space available. It's probably getting pretty full. I don't exactly know, but a lot of great speakers there. You're going to want to check out that conference. So that's in Chicago, by the way. So I know I have a lot of listeners in Chicago, and I've talked to a lot of friends over the years that say, why is there never anything in Chicago? Well, here is something in Chicago. It's at the Marriott Midway Hotel by Midway Airport, and that is 6520 South Cicero Avenue, right here in my area in Chicago. And Polaris Financial Planning is a big sponsor of that event, and I'm going to be there the whole time. sitting in the audience and learning. So that's my goal there, to pay attention, to learn, and maybe see what else I can do to help out. So if you want to go to a wonderful, wonderful conference in early October in Chicago, that's something you can check out. Just, I think if you Google Women of Color Beyond Belief, maybe add the word conference, you're going to find it, and you're going to have a great time if you go. And then, unfortunately, I guess sarcastically, fortunately for me, I get to go to another conference 2 weeks later, but it means I have to fit work and maybe podcast episodes around all of this. But October 17th through the 20th, I will be in Las Vegas for what's called CSI Con. This is put on by the Center for Inquiry, and it is a close replacement to what you may have heard of before as TAM, as the Amazing Meeting. And again, a great laundry list of speakers, which I'm not going to go through just like the other one because I'm going over a lot of this. And if you can go, you go look it up. It's in Vegas. I'm going to be there. That's enough, right? That's enough of a reason. It's Vegas and Phil's going to be there. What more could you need? Well, I've got one more thing for you. On the 17th, which is Thursday, that's the first day of the conference, they have some workshops, but the workshops end at about 4 in the afternoon. And so at 4:15, I'm going to collect together anyone who wants to go, a friend of mine, a friend of the show, someone who listens to the show, or just any random people we meet before 4:15. And we're going to go on a little adventure. Now, it's a pay your own way adventure. Just because if 100 people show up, I cannot be on the hook for that. We're going to go south outside of the hotel, and we're going to go over to Wahlburger. And so the nice thing about Wahlburger is, of course, food. Great burgers, great fries. They've got some other things that you can eat there. It's walk-up service. We're going to do that. And then we're going to turn around. So if you're facing Wahlburger and you turn around, right behind us is a thing called Fuel Bar. And if we're lucky, we can get some coupons where you get one drink, you get a second exact same drink, 2-for-1 special. So you buy one, you get one free. And these people are not fucking messing around. So 2 drinks may be too much for you. It may be too much for me. So maybe you find a friend and you split the cost and you each share a drink. But this is kind of one of those things where they throw bottles, they play catch, they make these fancy schmancy foo-foo drinks. You're going to absolutely love them. And we'll be doing that from 4:15 to 7:15, because I think it's at 7:30, is the opening ceremony back at the conference. So when the workshops are over and you're on your own for a couple of hours to find dinner or whatever, we're going to all go outside of the hotel, south across the street to Wahlburger. If you don't meet us at 4:15, because at 4:15, I shit you not, we're leaving the hotel. Because we got a tight schedule here. We're leaving at 4:15. If you can't join us till 4:30 or 4:45 or 5 o'clock, come find us. We'll be at Wahlburger and Fuel Bar. If you don't know where that is, ask anyone in the hotel. They'll know where these places are. It's just literally across the street to the south. It's got one of those sky sidewalks. You just walk over the road without even having to mess with traffic. And so we're going to do that for a couple of hours, and then we'll come back just in time for the opening meet and greet ceremony in the evening, again on October 13th. This is all calendar year 2019. In case you're hearing this somewhere in the future, you missed it. You missed it. But everyone who's listening now, if you're going to that conference, you can go. A few weeks after that, in November, November 1st through 3rd, I will be in Orlando for what's called the Free Flow Conference. This is Florida Freethinkers, and they're putting on that conference. If you can just go to freeflow.org, FREEFLO, Free Thought Conference from Florida, November 1 through 3. Again, a lot of great speakers, a lot of people you already know, and some people you should know. So if you can't make it to Chicago, if you can't make it to Vegas, hopefully you can make it to Florida. Go to Orlando. My wife and I are going. We're going to add a couple extra days, and it just works out that my brother who lives in England is going to be in Florida at the same time, so we're going to be able to visit. And fingers crossed, if I can make this work, I want to go to the new Star Wars exhibit, the Star Wars Land, I guess. I think this is part of Disney, right? They added a whole new section of Star Wars that just opened a few months ago. And maybe, if we can't get into that, or maybe on top of that, we'll go spend a day at Epcot. Absolutely adore going to Epcot, all the different cultures, the different foods, the different drinks that you can buy. I really, really have a good time with that. So I'm going to enjoy probably close to a week in Orlando, Florida. So in just over October, wow, it's not even 2 full months. I've got Italy, Women of Color Beyond Belief, CSI Con in Vegas, and then the conference in Florida. So I'm going to be very busy. We'll see how many shows I can get out during that time. And of course, if you're going to be at any of those conferences, please feel free to come say hello. Of course, if you're in the Vegas one, please feel free to join us and to go get something to eat and or drink. I see here a review on Stitcher, and I'm pretty sure I didn't do this a couple of weeks ago. If I did, my apologies. But it's from Anonymous. Very, very common name on the internet. Great show, Money and Atheism is the title. And quote, my 2 favorite subjects, money and atheism. He tackles the 2 great leeches sucking on humanity's blood, religion and the financial industry. And when he says, email me, he means it. Send him your questions. You get an answer. End quote. Yeah, I try. Every once in a while I find someone that sent me an email and apparently I did not answer. Maybe it got stuck in spam, or maybe I fucked up and didn't give you a response. So send another email. I really do mean to. Sometimes I do get very busy and things fall through the cracks like that, like emails. So email me a second time. I will not be offended. Even let me know that you emailed me before so I know to make double sure to go ahead and email you back. There is also a review on iTunes by Nuclear Dog and a 5-star review. Thank you very much. Of course, if you enjoy the show, if you enjoy the work and the effort that I put into this show, I would love for you to go leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. That's the only 2 places I know of. 5-star reviews just make it feel like it's worth doing to me. So you can help me out by going and leaving a review, and it also helps the show be discovered by other listeners, because a show that has 1 or 2 reviews obviously is new, only has probably a couple episodes, and may not be worthy of listening to. We're now, what episode are we in? We're way over 300. So go leave a 5-star review if you like the show. This, like I said, this one's from Nuclear Dog. The cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show gives a weekly dose of double brilliance by always covering sound investment plans and financial products of which to be wary, as well as timely, entertaining topics from skeptical secular viewpoint. The only correction in that is not quite weekly. For a long time, I was pretty regular every week. But recently, I've gotten a little busy, and that's getting a little hard. But the review goes on and continues. It's incredibly flattering prose, but basically talking about the number of people who want to scam you and take your money in religion and the financial services industry. I always thought that maybe after a year or so of doing this show that I would run out of things to cover, but there's always a new scam. There's always a new scheme. Maybe they're all totally legitimately legal, but there's always ways to take money from you. Matter of fact, I've already recorded another episode of Super Shitty Fund, which maybe will go in the next episode that I record. But there's always more stuff out there. There's a lot of people doing it, and they're making a lot of money by you not knowing basics about investing. So I'm going to wrap up, and thank you for your time. And like I said, you can go leave a 5-star review. Almost forgot. If you enjoy the show and want to support the show, help offset some of the costs and efforts for making the show, you can go to patreon.com/Phil, and you can give as little as $1 per show. And for this month, I might only have 2 shows, so you'd only be out $2. If you want to give $4 or $5 a show or $10 a show or $100 a show, I'm okay with that too. But it's only $1, and that gets you the show usually a day early and without those annoying commercials in the show. So go check that out, patreon.com/Phil. I hope to see you out there somewhere on the road. Until then, ciao.